So, picture this for a second. You are standing right outside the boardroom doors.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Right. The glass is frosted, but you can see the silhouettes of the board members already seated inside. And you are about to walk in and pitch a massive pivot in the organization's strategic direction.
High stakes moment.
Exactly. It's a calculated but very real risk. And in the 3 seconds before your hand touches the cold metal of the door handle, your heart rate just spikes. Your mouth goes dry.
Naturally.
Yeah. And there is this loud internal voice asking, well, who do I think I am to pull this off?
That imposter syndrome creeping in.
You know it. Now, conventional wisdom tells us that the truly great executives, the titans of industry, they just do not hear that voice. We assume they were born with some, I don't know, genetic mutation that just removes self-doubt.
Like they're just wired differently.
Yeah, right. Allowing them to glide into that boardroom feeling nothing but absolute bulletproof certainty. But, well, the research we are digging into today proves that assumption completely wrong. Welcome to today's deep dive. If you are an executive, a leader, or just a professional seeking clarity, this one is for you. Because confidence is not a genetic mutation. It is a highly engineered habit.
It's entirely manufactured.
Yeah.
And misunderstanding that single moment at the boardroom door is really what holds an enormous number of capable professionals back from reaching their full executive presence.
Right.
We look at a CEO projecting absolute calm during a crisis, and we just assume they simply don't feel fear. But the reality is it's much more mechanical than that.
Yeah, and that is where we need to start, tearing down the motivational fluff that usually surrounds this topic. We really want to look at the mechanics today.
Exactly.
Based on the source material we are unpacking today, we need to redefine what executive confidence actually is. We'll look at why your organization's survival depends on it and how you build it from the ground up.
It's a crucial breakdown.
Because the source draws a very sharp, very pragmatic line in the sand right away. It defines confidence as the exact opposite of fear-like, an unwavering core belief in your ability to get things done.
Operating on those internal mantras.
Yeah, things like, yes, I am a capable and competent person, and I can do anything I apply my mind to. But the interesting thing is it doesn't pretend those mantras are just, magic spells.
Far from it. I mean, the text is brutally honest about the executive struggle. As a leader, you are going to encounter deeply unpleasant stakeholders who actively try to undermine your people skills.
Oh, absolutely.
You'll face dark quarters where past failures just loom large, and that internal voice tries to convince you that history is about to repeat itself.
Which is terrifying.
It is. The source identifies the root of this as the opening fear. It's that visceral biological terror of starting something new or taking a big risk.
Right.
And what's fascinating here is that the author isn't promising a magical cure for fear.
Right.
They're outlining a methodology for acting in spite of that perpetual opening fear.
Okay, let's unpack this because, wait, if I am an executive with a decade of experience, shouldn't I eventually, I don't know, graduate out of that? The source claims this opening fear never truly stops.
Never.
So if that is true, then the goal isn't actually to become fearless, which feels a bit contradictory to the whole premise of building confidence. If that opening fear never goes away, is confidence less about being fearless and more about just having a really good internal shock absorber?
That is a fantastic analogy.
Yes.
Because fearlessness is a biological impossibility. And frankly, it's a dangerous liability for someone running a company.
Yeah, you just take reckless risks.
Exactly. Fear is simply data. It is your nervous system alerting you that the stakes are high and the outcome is uncertain. True executive confidence isn't the absence of that heart-pounding moment at the door.
Right.
It is possessing the internalized framework to process the spike in cortisol, acknowledge the risk, and just turn the handle anyway.
So it's less like trying to pave over every pothole on the road and more like installing an active suspension system in a vehicle.
I love that.
Right. The pothole, so the fear, the difficult board member, the volatile market, it's always going to be there. The car is absolutely going to hit it. But if your active suspension is dialed in, the chassis doesn't break. You absorb the kinetic energy, the cabin stays level, and you keep driving forward.
That captures the mechanism perfectly. The suspension system doesn't change the topography of the road. It just dictates your vehicle's response.
Yeah.
When a leader lacking that internal suspension hits the pothole of a past failure, the entire organization rattles. The steering gets thrown off. They hesitate. But with confidence acting as that shock absorber, the impact is mitigated.
Because of that baseline belief.
Exactly. The baseline belief that you are competent enough to handle the disruption. The forward momentum just continues.
And that forward momentum is where this shifts from a personal wellness metric into a massive organizational imperative, because the source talks about how confidence inherently brings about others' belief in your competence.
Yes, the ripple effect.
We're moving from the internal feeling to the external boardroom ripple effect, because your team is constantly reading your telemetry, aren't they?
Constantly. I mean, leadership is fundamentally an exercise in managing perception and trust. If we look at the behavioral psychology of a boardroom, we are dealing heavily with mirror neurons.
Oh, right.
Humans are biologically wired to mimic the emotional states of those in authority. So if you walk into a strategy meeting carrying unresolved anxiety if your internal suspension is bottoming out, your team will unconsciously absorb that anxiety.
They'll feel it immediately.
It really will.
Yeah.
And they will start second-guessing the data themselves.
It's the contagious nature of panic. If the pilot comes over the intercom with a shaky, terrified voice to announce a little turbulence, the passengers are going to start writing their wills.
Exactly. And conversely, an executive projecting calm competence stabilizes the entire room. The text highlights that this stabilization allows you to make decisions, quote, without weakness.
Without weakness, that's a strong phrase.
It is. Now, making a decision without weakness does not mean making the perfect decision every time. That is a crucial distinction.
Right.
It means making a decision decisively with the available data and owning the consequences without transmitting neuroticism to your direct reports.
Yeah, because when a team senses chronic hesitation in their leaders' decision-making, it just breeds organizational paralysis.
Absolutely, because if the person with the most context and power is terrified to choose a path, why should the middle manager stick their necks out to execute it?
They won't. They'll just hunker down and wait for the storm to pass.
Which totally kills innovation.
Yeah.
And this raises an important question about the vulnerability of leadership. Because confidence plays a surprisingly vital role in the feedback loop, too.
Oh, yeah.
To steer an organization effectively, you have to be able to ingest critical data about your own performance.
So what does this all mean for the listener? The source specifically notes that confidence allows you to handle incoming negative feedback without it, shattering your belief in your capabilities.
Right.
Is executive confidence essentially a feedback loop? Like, if you project competence, your team believes in you more, which makes executing the organization's direction easier.
It is a feedback loop, but it comes down to where their identity is anchored. For a leader operating without confidence, their self-worth is entirely tied to the illusion of perfection.
Right, because they don't have that shock absorber.
Exactly. So a piece of critical feedback, say, the board rejecting a proposed budget, feels like an existential threat to them. It triggers a full-blown identity crisis. They deflect, they blame the market, they get defensive.
I think we've all worked for someone like that at some point.
Haven't we all? But when you have that baseline confidence, you possess the psychological safety to decouple your core identity from the performance data.
You can separate yourself from the work.
Yes, you can look at a harsh critique and say, okay, this is data about a flawed strategy, not an indictment of my worth as a human being.
I see the flywheel effect here. If you have that internal suspension system, you process criticism without panicking.
Yeah.
Because you don't panic, you project stability. Exactly.
Because you project stability, your team trusts your macro direction. And because they trust you, executing the strategy becomes infinitely smoother, which ultimately validates your initial confidence.
It creates this beautiful self-reinforcing loop of organizational momentum. And that is exactly why this specific trait is the most fiercely sought-after quality in executive search processes.
Which brings us to the most urgent question of this entire deep dive. If this trait is the absolute bedrock of leadership presence, what happens if you don't naturally have it?
That's a big fear, right?
Yeah. What if you are the executive who currently feels like an imposter every single time you call a meeting? This is where the source material completely shifts the paradigm. It introduces confidence not as a static emotion, but as a keystone habit.
Yes. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, a keystone habit is an operational catalyst.
Yeah.
It is the initial domino that, once pushed over, naturally forces a chain reaction of other positive behaviors.
The text argues that establishing this single habit of confidence actually provides the literal motivation required to tackle the things blocking your larger goals.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the source gives some heavy-hitting examples of this domino effect. It says it can lead to mastering complex communication skills or even learning an entirely new language if your executive trajectory requires moving to a foreign country.
Massive undertakings.
Exactly. So it's like confidence isn't the final destination at all. It's literally just the very first domino that sets off a chain reaction of executive skill building. But I have to challenge the causality here a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
Let's look at a powerhouse executive, say a CFO who is an absolute master of financial modeling and crisis communication. We look at them and think, well, they are confident because they possess all those elite skills.
That is the assumption most people make, but it is entirely backward.
Yeah.
They acquire those elite skills because they first established the habit of confidence.
Unpack that. How does merely, believing in yourself teach you how to read a balance sheet or speak Mandarin?
Well, it doesn't teach you the hard skill itself. It lowers the activation energy required to endure the friction of learning it.
Oh, that makes sense.
Think about the sheer frustration of acquiring a high-level executive skill. It is grueling. You will make mistakes. If you lack confidence, the very first time you fail at a new task, your internal voice says, "See, I knew you couldn't do this."
And then you just abandon the effort.
Exactly. But if confidence is your baseline keystone habit, your default assumption is, "I am a capable person. I can figure this out." That belief keeps you in the chair during the frustrating hours of learning. The confidence provides the permission to be bad at something long enough to eventually become great at it.
Wow. So confidence isn't the trophy at the end of the race. It is the entry fee you pay just to get on the track. It precedes the competence.
It has to.
That is a massive mental shift. But it leaves us with a glaring chicken or egg problem. If confidence is the first domino that gives you the grit to learn everything else, how do you push that very first domino over if you are starting with zero confidence?
You engineer it. You build it using the framework this course provides.
Right.
The 5 C's.
Right. Clarity, commitment, consistency, and competence, which ultimately yield that 5th C, confidence.
That's the formula.
I want us to spend some serious time walking through this pipeline because the text suggests that running this specific sequence is what opens up the world of possibilities. It takes things that are currently terrifying and just renders them manageable.
The sequence is non-negotiable. You really cannot skip a step here. The first phase is clarity. You must have an absolutely ruthless definition of what you are trying to achieve.
Because ambiguity breeds anxiety.
Exactly. Often, leaders lack confidence because they are operating in the dark. A mandate like improve team performance is a breeding ground for anxiety because it cannot be objectively measured. You don't know when you've won.
You don't know what success looks like, so you constantly feel like you are failing. So clarity means defining the exact target. Like, we are going to reduce customer churn by 12% this quarter.
Yes, exactly that. And once the target is starkly defined, you move to the second C, which is commitment. This is where you make a binding decision to pursue the goal, fully anticipating that the opening fear will flood your system.
Ah, so you expect the fear.
Right. Commitment isn't a feeling of bravery. It is a structural decision to proceed despite the dread.
It's burning the boats. You announce the goal to the board, making retreat impossible without some kind of professional consequence.
Which forces you into the third and easily the most brutal phase, consistency.
Yeah, I bet.
This is the repeated execution of the necessary actions while the fear is still actively present in your body. This is where 90% of leaders abandon the framework.
Wait, let's linger on consistency, because something the text implies here makes me, honestly, a little uncomfortable as a professional. If competence is step 4, that means during step 3, consistency, we are actively doing something we are not yet good at. We are acting incompetently.
Yes.
But as an executive, I am quite literally compensated to be the most competent person in the room.
You were saying I have to willingly showcase clumsiness to my team in order to build this habit. That sounds like a fantastic way to lose the respect of the boardroom.
It absolutely feels that way to the ego, which is exactly why the opening fear screams so loudly. Your ego is desperate to protect your status as the expert.
Right.
But you must distinguish between general incompetence and the strategic vulnerability of acquiring a new capability. Let's say you are a brilliant operations executive who now has to lead a highly technical digital transformation.
Okay.
You don't know the tech stack. During the consistency phase, you have to sit in meetings with engineers and ask basic, fundamental questions. You will look temporarily less than omniscient.
You literally have to admit out loud, I don't understand how this API integration affects our timeline. Yes. And the unconfident leader avoids that at all costs. They just nod along, pretending to understand to protect their ego.
And then the project fails.
Exactly. They never learn the material, the project tanks, and their lack of confidence is totally validated.
Hmm.
But the confident leader applying this framework accepts the temporary clumsiness. They
Yeah.
say, I am willing to look like a beginner right now because I have clarity on where we are going, and I am committed to reaching competence.
And the irony is, I mean, the team actually respects the leader who asks the basic questions more than the one who bluffs, don't they?
Always. Because it projects a deep underlying security. It signals to the team, hey, my identity is not threatened by what I don't know yet.
Wow.
That gritty, repetitive consistency, asking the questions, making the clumsy first attempts, failing and iterating it, it eventually breaks through the friction. The technical knowledge clicks. The new skill becomes internalized. And that is what brings you to the fourth C, confidence.
Yeah.
So you actually get good at the thing. The digital transformation launches successfully. You know how to read the telemetry now. And finally, as a natural, unavoidable byproduct of that hard-won competence, you experience the fifth C, confidence. You now possess undeniable empirical evidence that you can face an unknown challenge, endure the clumsy learning phase, and emerge victorious.
It is a totally mechanical formula. You aren't just summoning bravery from the ether. You are earning it through a sequential grind.
Exactly.
You get clear, you commit, you consistently endure being a beginner until you achieve competence. And confidence is really just the chemical reward your brain produces at the end of all that.
And because it is a keystone habit, you take that proven formula with you into the next arena. When the next terrifying challenge rises, whether it's, I don't know, a hostile acquisition or pivoting the entire product line, your brain recognizes the pattern.
It's seen this movie before.
Right. It says, we know how to navigate this. We just run the 5 Cs. The opening fear will still be there, but its volume is drastically reduced because the methodology has a track record of success.
That brings a completely different weight to the source's claim that building this habit makes the world your oyster. It sounds like a cliche on the surface, but mechanically, it is a statement of fact.
It really is.
If you have a universal, battle-tested framework for acquiring competence in any domain, there is logically no limit to the possibilities you can pursue. The boundaries of your executive influence expand in direct proportion to your willingness to endure the 5 Cs.
That is the ultimate takeaway here. Confidence is the operational machinery of a limitless career.
All right, let's synthesize this for the listener to take back to their organization. We started by dismantling the myth of the fearless executive. True leadership presence is not the absence of the opening fear.
No, not at all.
It is the active suspension system that allows you to absorb the shocks of risk, difficult stakeholders, and potential failure without breaking down. We explored how this internal stability creates a massive external ripple effect.
Stabilizing your team's mirror neurons.
Exactly, allowing you to make decisions decisively and enabling you to process critical feedback without suffering a total identity crisis.
We also reframed confidence as a keystone habit. It is the crucial first domino that lowers the activation energy required to master all other difficult executive skills.
And we mapped out the engineering process to build it from scratch. Clarity, commitment, consistency, and competence. But the price of admission is a willingness to endure the clumsy, vulnerable phase of consistency.
You have to be willing to be a beginner to earn the right to be confident.
It requires checking your ego at the boardroom door, but the return on investment is just unshakable leadership presence.
Absolutely.
To the executive listening to this, recognize that your confidence is not a luxury. It is not a personal wellness initiative. It is a load-bearing pillar of your organization. When you invest in engineering this keystone habit, you are actively increasing the execution capacity and psychological safety of every single person who relies on your leadership.
Well said.
But before we let you get back to running your team, here's a final thought to mull over regarding that feedback loop we discussed earlier. The source brilliantly points out that confidence acts as a protective shield, allowing you to handle negative feedback without it destroying your self-belief.
Right.
But as you build this shield using the 5 Cs, how do you calibrate it? How do you ensure that your engineered confidence remains a semi-permeable membrane, filtering out the noise, and doesn't eventually harden into an impenetrable wall that blocks out the very real, uncomfortable constructive criticism you actually need to hear to keep evolving?
That's the real balancing act.
It really is. Think about that calibration as you head into your next strategy meeting. We will catch you on the next deep dive.